On that rainy night in Manhattan, a firefighter got into my cab with a soaked jacket and a smell of smoke that didn't seem like it was just coming from his clothes. It seemed like it was coming from inside him. He didn't ask for conversation, but the hand shaking on his knee gave away the paradox that nobody likes to admit. There are people who run into the fire and then crumble in their own hallway at home. And then came the most controversial and truthful sentence I've ever heard from a hero. I saved people, but I didn't save myself, as if the courage of the job had turned into poison for the family. After a few blocks, he let it out, looking at the foggy window. Today, I pulled a whole family out of a building, and when I got home, there was a suitcase waiting for me at the door. He swallowed hard and completed. My wife said I turned into someone she doesn't recognize. And instead of apologizing, he said there was a quick way to fix everything, as if love were an emergency procedure. Only, before explaining this solution, his cell phone vibrated on the seat. A message appeared with a name that shouldn't have been there, and it was in that second that you could understand why that suitcase wasn't a threat. It was an escape. The back door opened with a wet rubber slap, and he got in without asking for permission, like someone who had already asked for too much permission that day. The firefighter jacket was open at the chest, dark from the rain and with a smell of smoke that wouldn't leave even with avenue wind. He sat straight, but his knee was bouncing in a short rhythm, and his right hand kept going back and forth on the coat zipper. When I asked for the destination, he took half a second longer than normal, as if he were pulling the address from some place that wasn't his phone. Queens, he said, voice low, dry. The city outside was shining in puddles, and the windshield wiper was making that tired, hissing sound. In the first few blocks, he avoided his own reflection in the glass, turning his face to the lights of Manhattan as if looking for an exit on the asphalt. His breathing was short, and when a truck passed by splashing water, he blinked too fast, like someone who gets startled out of habit. I asked if the shift had been rough. He looked at the front seat only with his eyes, without moving his neck, and answered, "Every shift is rough when you bring the work home." The sentence came out like a sign, without decoration. Then he cleared his throat and let out the name, Ethan, 40-something, he said, and the rest hung suspended in the air. As the taxi advanced down 6th Avenue, the car radio picked up a station and dropped a low jazz, the kind that seems like smoke. Ethan messed with the cuff of his coat, adjusting it as if the clothes were tight. I saw the detail that a lot of people don't see. Those who live in emergency mode usually don't know how to switch off. The body stays ready to run even when it's sitting down. I asked if he wanted me to lower the volume. He made a minimal gesture with his hand, half whatever, half leave it. And then he said, without me asking, "Today I pulled a whole family out of a building." He stopped, swallowed hard, and when I got home, the rain thickened slightly, drumming on the roof of the taxi like impatient fingers. Ethan ran the palm of his hand over his forehead and let his fingers slide down his face as if he were trying to wake up. His gaze remained stuck on the street, but his body wasn't there anymore. It was somewhere else. I've seen this in passengers coming back from the hospital, from the police station, from a wake. The person gets in the car, and it seems like only the body arrived. Then the rest comes slowly, along the way. "My wife," he started, and his voice failed just a little, as if he had stumbled on an invisible stone. I didn't rush him. There is nothing that shuts someone's mouth more than haste. I just kept the car steady, without accelerating, without sudden braking, like someone offering a floor. Ethan drew air and completed. She didn't scream. She just stood there, and there was a suitcase. His knee bounced harder, and his hand went straight to the edge of the seat, squeezing the upholstery. He looked at the back of my neck through the rearview mirror and let out, almost as a warning, and what she said, "You can't unhear." The phrase stayed there, hanging, asking for the next piece of the story. When Ethan said the word suitcase, the city seemed to get noisier outside. A bus passed by puffing water into the gutter, the wiper scratched the windshield in a metronome rhythm, and he stayed with his jaw locked, looking at the white lane as if he were counting. I got home with my boots still wet. He spoke, and his hand made a gesture in the air, as if he were taking mud off the rug. I opened the door, and the suitcase was already there. The knee continued bouncing, but now there was a new detail. His foot was also trembling inside the boot. He described the apartment hallway like someone giving a deposition. Weak light from the lamp. Smell of old food mixed with disinfectant. The television on without sound. Claire standing near the wall. No crying, no screaming, no crossed arms like in a soap opera. Just a firm look and a low voice. "Ethan," she said, "I can't take living in a rescue zone anymore." He repeated that phrase in the taxi just the way she would have said it, and his chest went up and down as if he were holding back the rest. She pointed to the suitcase and said, "Today you sleep outside our bedroom. Tomorrow, we talk, if possible." I asked where the suitcase was, whose it was. He turned his face quickly and answered, "Hers." And that was when things got stranger, because a leaving bag isn't like a travel bag. A travel bag is in a rush. A leaving bag has a rehearsal. Ethan said the suitcase was closed, standing up, with the handle pulled, as if it already knew the way to the door. And Claire didn't ask for an explanation. She didn't demand details of the fire. She didn't ask if he was okay. She just said a sentence that seems small but knocks any man down. "You come home alive, but you don't make it back to us." His hand squeezed the seat, and the ring on his finger scraped on the fabric. I let him talk, and only came in with a short question, the kind that doesn't push, only illuminates. "Had she been warning you?" Ethan let out a dry laugh, one of those that comes out halfway, like someone trying to be funny and failing. She had. I was the one pretending it was street noise. And there you can see how things accumulate. It's not a big event that breaks a home, it's a bunch of small delays. If anyone watching wants to avoid reaching this point, there is a simple exercise that fits in 5 minutes. Ask, with the phone in your pocket and looking in the eye, "What do I do that tires you out?" And stay silent until the answer is finished. No defense, no, but I work. Just listen. Ethan didn't do that, and the suitcase appeared. He swallowed hard, passed his hand over the back of his neck and said, "She had a notebook." He said notebook as if it were a dangerous word. And I realized the suitcase wasn't just a threat. It was proof. Proof that that conversation already had dates, already had a record, already had a history. The taxi entered a narrower street. The sound of the tires changed, and Ethan completed. When she opened that notebook, I understood that she had been counting what I pretended wasn't happening, and a pause hung in the air. One of those that ask for the next page. Ethan messed with the cuff of his jacket as if the fabric were itching, and then started listing things the way a man lists when he finally stops disguising. "I wake up startled," he said. "Any noise, and I get up. I get up already speaking loud." His hand made a quick movement, as if pushing someone out of the way. I answer sharply, and then I disappear. He didn't say disappear like someone going for a walk. He spoke like someone vanishing inside the house, even while being there. The taxi passed a traffic light, and the red light hit his face for an instant, making the dark circles under his eyes deeper. He said Claire didn't argue at the time. She waited. She saved it. And when he reached the limit of tiredness, she pulled the notebook. A simple notebook, spiral, black cover. No drama, but full of dates. She opened to a page and pointed with her finger like someone showing a bank statement. "Here," she said. "Night you slept on the couch without talking to me." Ethan repeated in the back seat. She had noted down even the side of the couch I chose. And it wasn't exaggeration. It was detail. It was the kind of detail that only appears when someone has already been alone inside the relationship for a long time. He described small scenes, almost silly, that become poison when they repeat. The bathroom door slamming, the plate left in the sink, the message viewed and ignored, the "I'm coming" that never arrives. Claire noted when he promised tomorrow it gets better and when tomorrow became more of the same. And in every note there was a short sentence, dry, without adjectives, almost like a report. Ethan arrived and didn't ask about the day. Ethan raised his voice because the remote control disappeared. Ethan went out without saying where he was going. Ethan's hand trembled while he spoke, and he rubbed his thumb on his nail like someone trying to scrape something off that won't come out. I asked if she showed the notebook to anyone. He answered right away, no. She didn't want an audience. She wanted change. And that's a thing few people understand. People who want gossip make noise. People who want a solution gather evidence. Because they know that one day they will need to defend themselves from phrases like "you are exaggerating." Claire didn't take notes to humiliate. She took notes so she wouldn't be called crazy. If anyone out there on the other side is living a similar routine, there is a simple resource that doesn't turn into a war. Agree on a house meeting once a week, 15 minutes, no cell phone, with 2 questions: what worked and what didn't work? And close with a small agreement, just one. The problem is, Ethan didn't do any meeting. He just put out fires. And then he said the phrase that made the air in the taxi get denser. In the notebook, there was the list of excuses I repeated. The word excuses came out with a sound of metal. He said Claire had noted even his same sentences, as if she had recorded them. I'm tired. It's work stuff. You don't understand. Stop that. And when a person sees themselves repeating the same script, a strange shame comes up. Not shame for having a problem, shame for having become predictable. Ethan looked at the window as if looking for another route and asked, almost whispering, "How did she see it before me?" The answer was in the notebook, and the next part was going to show where that really started. Ethan stood looking at the wet asphalt for a while, and his hand stopped messing with the zipper. It was as if his body were choosing a right point to return. When he started talking again, his voice came out lower. "It didn't start at home," he said. "It started on a call in Harlem. I heard the noise of an ambulance in the distance and saw his shoulder go up slightly like a reflex. He didn't turn his head, just held his breath for a second and let it out slowly. The city can be beautiful, but on a siren night, it becomes a walking trigger." He described the old building as if he were seeing it again. Narrow stairs, hot handrail, a smell of burnt plastic mixed with food, people screaming in another language, the sound of glass bursting somewhere. There was a child, he spoke, and the word came out hard like stone, and there was too much smoke. He didn't make drama. He just described what an outside eye would see: foggy mask, gloves slipping, a door that wouldn't open, a small hand grabbing his neck with force. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, the siren was still beating in his chest like a hammer. And then came the detail that changed everything. We got out. But a noise remained. He gave a light slap on his knee, imitating the rhythm. It stayed here, and it didn't stop anymore. Since that day, he said his body started reacting before his head. Smell of burning in the subway, and he already went rigid. A store alarm, and he already looked for an exit with his eyes. The noise of the microwave beeping, and he responded as if it were an emergency radio. At home, Claire made coffee, and the pop of the coffee maker seemed like a fuse. Ethan would clench his jaw, get up out of nowhere, go to the bathroom, and stay there for a while with the faucet running, just to have a constant sound. He called this locking from the inside. It wasn't staying silent out of politeness. It was as if he turned off the part that talks, that hugs, that asks, "How was your day?" The body stayed present, but the person disappeared. I asked if he had told this to Claire. Ethan shook his head, looking at the window. "I said it was just tiredness, and that is where many people get lost. They call tiredness what has already turned into something else. For those watching and identifying, there is a practical difference that helps. Tiredness improves with rest. A trigger gets worse with silence. A simple way to test is to note down, for a week, 3 things. What sound irritated you? What smell accelerated you? What situation made you disappear? It's not to become your own therapist. It's to stop pretending everything is normal. And if that seems too big, starting small solves it. Breathe 4 counts, hold 4, release 6, repeat 3 times. Seems silly, but it changes the body before the fight starts. Ethan passed his hand over his face and said Claire noticed. She would say, "You are here, but you are not." And he would answer, "You invent things," until she stopped insisting and started writing in the notebook. The last note, according to him, had a sentence that hurt more than any scolding: "He doesn't come home. He just coasts." The taxi entered a quieter stretch, and Ethan kept looking at a red fire hydrant on the corner, as if that had some hidden meaning. The next piece of this story didn't come from a fire. It came from a friend. When Ethan spoke of the colleague from the station, his posture changed a little. His shoulder relaxed a centimeter as if entering a safer subject. "Rico," he said, and the name came with a breath of familiarity. Rico was one of those guys who talk loud, laugh loud, slap others on the back as if the world were a bar. Ethan said that, after the shift, Rico always had a quick solution. "Let's shut off the brain," he would say. And the phrase came along with the sound of bottles, sports television, and that sweet and strong smell of drink mixed with fried food. Ethan described the bar near the station. Bluish light, sticky floor, laughter bursting from table to table, and the radio playing loud enough for no one to hear their own head. He said he refused the first time, went back home, took a shower, tried to sleep. But he didn't sleep. His head stayed lit, and his body stayed on alert, as if the mattress were a fire floor. The next day, after another heavy shift, Rico appeared again. "Just one," Rico said, raising a finger. "One to take away the taste of smoke." Ethan said he entered the bar like someone entering an elevator going down fast, without thinking much, just pressing the button. He ordered a beer, then another, then something stronger, just to relax. His voice got short in this part, and he pulled the air as if the smell of the bar had come back inside the taxi. He described the effect the way a lot of people recognize, even if they never admit it out loud. The internal noise lowering for a few minutes, the body getting looser, the tongue getting faster, the laughter coming easy. Only along with it came something else, the return home. Ethan spoke of the building hallway, the elevator going up slowly, the smell of the apartment, and spoke of Claire waiting awake, sitting on the sofa, without complaining, just looking. "Did you drink?" she asked. Ethan answered crookedly, with that false courage that drink gives. "So what?" His tone went up. The conversation turned into friction. It wasn't a soap opera fight with plates flying. It was worse. It was contempt. One letting out short sentences, the other returning dryly. And the next day, he didn't even remember the words properly, only remembered her look. I asked if Rico knew what was happening at home. Ethan shrugged. "Rico thinks everything is solved with a shot and a joke, and there are a lot of people like that. Not out of malice, but out of fear of facing their own silence. But shutting off isn't solving. It's delaying, and delaying charges interest. If anyone out there feels they are using alcohol, meds, or screens to erase their head, a practical test helps. Choose one night a week without any of that and observe what appears. Not to torture yourself, to discover what is being avoided. And if too much stuff appears, there are safe paths, therapy, support group, simple physical activity that pulls the body to the present, like walking 40 minutes at a constant pace. Ethan didn't do that. He chose Rico's shortcut. And then he let out a detail that changed the root of the conversation. "There was one night I came back worse. It wasn't just arriving louder, it was arriving different." He said he dropped the key twice at the door, spoke loud in the hallway, laughed in a way that didn't even seem like him. Claire opened the door and asked nothing. She just took a step back, leaving the path free, like someone who doesn't want to touch. Ethan went in, saw the suitcase leaning in a corner, and realized it had already been there for days, waiting for the right time. The right time, apparently, was arriving, and the next scene was going to happen in front of other people. In Manhattan, November usually gets cloudier, and the cold tightens with the passing of days, in that way that enters through the cuff of the coat and doesn't ask for permission. Ethan said it was on one of those nights, when Claire insisted on a dinner with friends, just so we can go back to being normal for 2 hours. He arrived, still with the smell of smoke in his hair, and tried to make the face of someone who is fine. At the restaurant, low light, cutlery clinking, loud laughter at the next table. Claire spoke little, but kept her posture, as if she were holding the night with both hands. Ethan described the beginning as a sequence of small stumbles. A friend asked about work, and he answered too short. The waitress got the order wrong, and he let out a seriously too loud. Nothing huge. Just repeated, the kind of thing that at home turns into a discussion, in public turns into embarrassment. Claire put her hand on his arm for a second, a breathe gesture, and Ethan pulled his arm away as if the touch burned. The table went quiet for an instant, and someone tried to save it with a bad joke about the city never sleeping. The nonsense that lit the fuse was almost ridiculous. A glass slipped, hit the edge of the table, and spilled ice on the napkin. That sound of glass hitting echoed in his head like an alarm. Ethan raised his voice, not to ask for a cloth, but to complain to the world. The chair dragged on the floor, and several people turned their faces at the same time. Claire didn't scream. She just stayed very still, with her gaze fixed on him, like someone who had already seen this scene happen at home and now saw it outside. Ethan pushed the chair, walked out, and the bell of the restaurant door rang like a period. The next day, the damage came in messages, not in screams. Claire received a text from a friend, "Is everything okay there?" Another, "If you need to talk, call." Ethan said he saw Claire reading that in the kitchen, standing still, with the phone in her hand and the cup forgotten on the counter. He tried to be funny, with that crooked humor of someone who wants to run away from the subject. "Look, I became a celebrity of the dinner." Claire didn't even laugh. She just answered, "Now there are people asking if I am safe." And that sentence hung in the air, because it wasn't about physical safety. It was about living, walking on eggshells. Ethan said that night, Claire didn't discuss the glass, nor the chair, nor the tone of voice. She was direct. "Tomorrow we go to therapy." He said, "I'll go." Fast, like someone who wants to wrap it up. Only his "I'll go" seemed too light for the size of the hole that had opened. He adjusted his jacket in the back seat and asked, more to the glass than to me, "And what if I go and freeze up there?" The taxi turned the corner. The rain hit harder, and the next part of the story hung on that promise. Ethan said Claire scheduled the couple's therapy for a Thursday afternoon in an office near Columbus Circle. He told how she spoke the address without raising her voice, like someone scheduling a hearing, not a date. "I already confirmed," she said. "Arrive 15 minutes early." On the day, the city was humid, the subway full, and Ethan spent the morning telling himself he would go. Drank strong coffee, put on a clean shirt, even separated the insurance document, everything right. Only when it was time to leave, he didn't grab his wallet. He grabbed the radio. The phone rang with an offer for extra work, and he accepted on the spot. He described the moment as if watching a replay. Claire was at the door with her coat in hand. Ethan already with his backpack on his shoulder going the opposite way. She asked, "Where are you going?" He answered. An extra came up. "Just today." Claire stood still, waiting for the rest, as if the phrase "just today" needed to come accompanied by a promise of return. Ethan didn't give it. She asked again, now slower, "Are you going to leave me alone in that room?" Ethan averted his gaze and said, "I'm not in a good place for that." And he left before the conversation took root. Claire went alone. Ethan said he didn't see it, but found out later. She sat in the waiting room, with the low sound of a coffee machine and a water fountain making aquarium noises. The therapist opened the door, looked at the clock, and Claire stayed there, holding her purse on her lap like someone holding the last attempt. 15 minutes, 20, 30. Ethan didn't show up. The session became half a session. The chair next to her stayed empty, and the empty chair was saying everything he didn't say. At night, when Ethan returned, Claire wasn't crying. She was organized. The same calm he had already seen in the suitcase. He arrived trying to enter through the hallway as if the subject could be avoided. Claire was in the living room with the television off, the notebook on the table. She asked, "Did you work extra or did you run away?" Ethan let out an automatic, "It's not like that," and she opened the notebook to a new page. It wasn't a fight note. It was a choice note. She wrote right there in front of him, without looking, "Therapy day." He didn't come. Then she closed the notebook and said, "This isn't about money." Ethan tried to defend himself with short sentences, stumbling, "At the station. They needed Claire interrupted, without raising her voice. "You chose the place where they applaud you, and avoided the place where you need to change." Then came the turn that changes the direction of the relationship. Claire didn't ask anymore. She communicated, "From today on, I stopped chasing you for conversation." She pointed to the suitcase in the corner, the same suitcase that had already become a character in that house. "I'm not going to pick a fight. I'm going to pick an exit." Ethan stood still in the middle of the room, coat still wet, unable to sit down. And when he opened his mouth to promise again, Claire raised her hand like someone cutting music. Promises without presence became noise. In the taxi, his knee went back to bouncing, and he let out a phrase that already seemed too late. "I thought working more would fix it." The street ahead opened up, and the next impact wouldn't come from Claire. It would come from the station itself. Ethan said that at the station, nobody asked about therapy. They asked about performance. And that, for a man like him, weighs different. He said the superior called him to a small room with a metal table, smell of old coffee, and a bulletin board full of crumpled papers. It wasn't colleague talk. It was formal talk. "Sit down," the superior said, and the tone had neither affection nor anger. It had tiredness. Ethan sat, hands on his knees, and his boot tapped lightly on the floor, almost without him noticing. The superior was direct, spoke of complaints, spoke of lateness, spoke of explosions, said there were people avoiding working on the same team because Ethan was unpredictable. Ethan repeated in the taxi a phrase he heard in that room: "You are becoming a liability." And it wasn't a risk to the burning building, it was a risk to the team. The superior pulled a sheet, read as if reading a report, and Ethan kept looking at the edge of the table, jaw locked. When the superior raised his eyes, the sentence came dry. "You are going to be suspended for a few days. And if this continues, you know what comes next." Ethan tried to argue, not with screaming, with that speech of a worker who thinks hard labor buys excuses. "I have been on many calls," he said. "I didn't miss work." The superior leaned the pen on the table and answered, "You can be present and still be absent." That phrase was a punch without noise. Ethan stayed quiet, and the superior continued, "You aren't the first, nor will you be the last. Only there is a difference. Some seek help, others hide behind the uniform." Ethan squeezed his hands, and I saw the white knuckles through the rearview mirror. On the way out, he said he passed through the station hallway and heard a radio static, a laugh far away, someone high-fiving someone. The world went on. Only he was delayed inside his own body. He went to the locker room, opened the locker, saw the old photo taped to the door, him and Claire at the beginning of the marriage, smiling with their eyes, holding 2 cups of coffee on the street. He stood looking at the photo for a few seconds, and the noise of the shower in another stall seemed like internal rain. He closed the locker with force, as if he wanted to close that version of him too. That night, Ethan returned home different, no longer with the chest of someone who thinks they are right. He returned with the look of someone who took a stop from 2 sides. Only when he arrived, Claire wasn't waiting on the sofa. The house was silent, with the kitchen light on and the sound of the refrigerator turning on and off. He called her name once. Nothing. Went to the bedroom and saw the closet door ajar. The corner where the suitcase stayed was empty. He swallowed hard, went back to the living room, and there he saw Claire's notebook on the table, open to a new page. Ethan said the page had few words, written with firm handwriting. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. He read it aloud in the taxi, as if he were still in the room. "I won't wait for you to lose everything to decide to change." His hand squeezed the seat, and he spoke. It was there that I realized she was already going. And in the next piece of the story, he would discover that her exit wasn't an impulse. It was a plan. Ethan said that night he didn't go after Claire on impulse. He did something that surprised even himself. He stood still in the living room, listening to the sound of the building, the elevator going up, someone dragging furniture on the floor above, and that silence that isn't peace. It's a warning. Then he went to the bedroom and started searching like someone searching for a lost document. Only the whole house seemed different, as if it had already been separated. A drawer was emptier, a hanger left over, a space too clean. He pulled the closet door and saw that several of her pieces had disappeared. It wasn't fight and disappearance. It was organization and departure. The next morning, when Claire returned, she didn't come in running or hiding. She came in with a small bag, put the key on the hook, and took off her coat calmly. Ethan stood in the hallway, leaning on the wall, trying to seem firm. He asked, "Where did you sleep?" Claire answered without looking, "At my friend's house." She went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and got water, as if she were in a borrowed place. Ethan repeated the question, now harder. "Are you leaving?" Claire closed the bottle, leaned on the counter, and said, "I am preparing myself." It wasn't a threat. It was a schedule. He said that when Claire went into the shower, he saw a folder on the living room table. A simple folder, one of those we use for taxes. Her name was written with a pen on the tab. Ethan opened it carefully, as if messing with something forbidden. Inside, there were rental papers for a studio in Queens, copies of documents, a list of bills, and a printout of an email with a subject like visit confirmation. He stood looking at that with short breath because there was what he didn't want to see. Claire had already decided that you can't live on promises. It wasn't emotion of the moment. It was a plan to survive. When Claire came out of the shower, wet hair, simple clothes, she saw the open folder. She didn't scream, just stopped, dried her hands on the towel, and stood looking at Ethan with a kind of tiredness that doesn't ask for explanation. Ethan spoke first, pointing to the papers. "So this is it. You already have everything ready," Claire answered. "I have the basics. The rest is you who needs to decide." Ethan tried to turn the story to his side. "You are abandoning me." Claire didn't raise her tone. Just corrected, "I am stopping abandoning myself." The sentence came out clean, and Ethan stayed with his mouth half open without an answer. He said that in that moment, he realized the real danger. It wasn't losing the marriage because of a fight. It was losing because she had left hope mode and entered action mode. She had already passed the phase of arguing. Now she made lists, and a list is stronger than a tear. I saw Ethan clench his fists in the back seat and release slowly, as if he were learning not to blow up right there. He looked out the window and asked, without looking at me, when was it that she started planning this? And the answer was in the notebook, in the dates, in the "you didn't comes," in the "you disappeareds." Only now it wasn't a record notebook. It was an exit folder. Ethan then let out another piece of information, short, that opened a new hole in the story. She also spoke with my boss. He said it like someone admitting something he didn't want to say out loud. Claire wasn't just protecting herself, she was creating a network. And when a person does that, they don't go back for a pretty request. The taxi entered a wider avenue and the noise of the tires changed. Ethan took a deep breath and said, "I thought I still had time." But the next scene would show that his time was running out in a very concrete way. Ethan said that after a heavy shift, he returned home with his body throbbing and his head empty on purpose. Rain on the hood, slow elevator, hallway with flickering light. He entered and realized right away that something had changed, because the house has a way of warning when someone has really left. There was no music, there was no television, there was no smell of food, only the sound of the heater cracking and a smooth silence, like a freshly painted wall. He dropped the key on the table and called, "Claire?" His voice hit the hallway and returned without an answer. He kept walking to the living room, taking off his jacket slowly, as if afraid of making noise. And then he saw it. On top of the table, right in the center, was Claire's ring. Not in a little jar, not hidden. There, exposed, like an object that becomes a message. The light from the lamp caught the metal and made a small, cold shine. Ethan stopped, stood looking, and his hand closed and opened twice, without touching anything. He approached, touched the ring with the tip of his finger, and the metal spun a little on the wood, making a thin sound that seemed too loud in that room. There was no note, no sentence explaining, just that. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for conversation, asks for understanding. Ethan grabbed his cell phone, called once, went to voicemail, called again, voicemail, sent a short message, "Where are you?" Nothing. Sent another, answer, nothing. The screen illuminated his face from below, making the dark circles stronger. He went to the window, looked at the street, saw his reflection in the glass and looked away immediately, as if he didn't want to face himself in that state. Returned to the table, stood up, and for the first time in the ride, he spoke a complete sentence without cutting in the middle. I didn't know how to be alone without noise. He said he opened the fridge and closed it, opened the cupboard and closed it. Went to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and let the water run for a few seconds just to have sound, then turned it off, and the silence returned heavier. He sat on the sofa, grabbed the remote control, turned on the television at low volume, and kept changing channels without watching. His finger repeated the gesture like someone looking for a button that fixes. Then he got up again, walked through the house, and stopped in the place where the suitcase used to be, empty. The corner clean without a mark, and it was there that he understood it wasn't fight and reconciliation. It was an exit. I asked if he went after her that night. Ethan answered, "I went to the door, opened it, looked at the hallway, and came back." The sentence came out short and strange. It didn't look like courage. It looked like paralysis. That was his rock bottom. It wasn't screaming. It wasn't drinking. It wasn't slamming doors. It was staying without movement, with the ring on the table and the voicemail as the only answer. He kept repeating her name into the phone like someone trying to make sound turn into presence. And when it didn't, he stayed with the device in his hand, staring at the screen, until the battery fell to red. Before finishing this stretch, Ethan let out something that made the next inevitable. "I thought she was punishing me." He said punishing like someone who still hadn't understood the size of what was happening. And then I asked very simply to open the door to the next part, and afterwards, "Did she show up?" Ethan licked his dry lips and answered, "She showed up, only she didn't come alone." And the way he said that already gave away that the following conversation wouldn't be about love, it would be about limits. Ethan said Claire showed up at the end of the next morning, when the rain had turned into drizzle, and the light came in gray through the window. He heard the key turn in the door and got up in a jump, as if he had heard an alarm. Claire entered with her coat closed up to her neck, hair tied back, face clean, no sign of a bad night's sleep. Behind her came her brother, a calm man, tall, broad shoulders, posture of someone who didn't come to fight, came to guarantee no one is going to scream. Ethan clenched his jaw instantly, not because he was angry, because he understood the message. Witness, protection, limit. Claire didn't sit down, stood near the table where the ring still was. Her brother stayed in the hallway doorframe without invading too much, but close enough to intervene if needed. Ethan tried to speak first. He started. Claire raised her hand, palm open, and cut him off. "Not today." Her voice came out low, firm, without tremor. She pointed to the ring, then pointed to the suitcase that wasn't there anymore and said, "This here isn't punishment, it's safety." Ethan took a step forward and her brother adjusted his body weight, without threatening, just marking presence. The whole room got small. Claire then spoke a sentence that changes the axis. "I'm not going back to talking if you don't look for help alone." "No, we look together. No, let's see." "Alone," Ethan repeated in the taxi. Later, like someone still trying to understand, she said alone. And Claire explained with very few words, in the most real way possible. "I already did my part. I scheduled therapy. I waited. I warned. Now it's you." Ethan tried to negotiate. "I can schedule. I can." Claire didn't accept promises. She asked for concrete action today, not next week, not after the next shift. Her brother checked his watch and Claire continued, "If you want me to believe, you will have to do it before I see you get better." Ethan stood still in the middle of the room, hands open and empty, like someone who has no more argument. He tried to switch for an emotional plea, that kind of phrase that tries to pull the person by the heart. "Claire, I love you." Claire answered, without raising the tone, "Then treat yourself." Ethan breathed hard through his nose, looked at the floor, and then looked at her brother as if it were unfair to have another person there. The brother said nothing, just stayed. Sometimes witness silence is what prevents the old dynamic from returning. Before leaving, Claire made one thing clear and simple. "I am not going to block you. I am not going to disappear. But I am also not going to live with this." She took a step towards the door and said, "You don't need to prove it to me with a speech. Prove it to me with attitude." Ethan tried to ask where she was going to stay, and she answered, "With whom I feel safe." Her brother opened the door, and before leaving, Claire turned her face just enough for Ethan to see. "When you do your part, we talk. If you do it." The door closed, and the click of the lock sounded like a line being drawn on the floor. In the taxi, Ethan ran his hand over his face and let out a long breath, as if he were trying to return to his own body. He asked, almost without a voice, "Where do I look for help in New York?" And that question wasn't small. It was the first time he wasn't trying to explain. He was trying to act. I answered with simplicity, without turning it into a lecture. There are centers, clinics, therapy, groups, and even care through work, depending on the case. He nodded, and then let out, "I'm going today." But the way he held the cell phone, you could see that "I'm going today" is easy to say. The hard part is walking through the right door and sitting down for real. And that was exactly what he would do in the next topic. Ethan said that that same day, he entered a support center in Manhattan without looking to the sides, like someone crossing a busy street without wanting to think too much. The reception had white light, smell of disinfectant and weak coffee, and a low sound of air conditioning that seemed to breathe for everyone. He arrived with his work jacket folded on his arm, as if he didn't know where to put his own identity. The receptionist asked for name, date of birth, emergency contact. Ethan answered everything on automatic, but his hands trembled when he held the pen. To the side, two people sitting looked at the floor. No one talked. It was a full silence. When they called Ethan, he got up too fast, almost knocking over the chair. He entered a small room with 2 chairs and a simple table. On the other side was an older woman, glasses on the tip of her nose, calm voice, firm posture. No congratulations for coming smile. She had the presence of someone who has seen everything. She looked at the folded jacket and said, "You can leave it there." Ethan put the jacket on the chair to the side and stood with empty hands, without uniform, without function. The woman opened a file, asked a short and direct question. "What brought you here today?" Ethan started with work, as always. She cut in with objective kindness, I understood. "Now talk about your home." He told of the notebook, the suitcase, the ring on the table, the voicemail. Told of the siren noise that stuck to his body after that fire in Harlem. Told of the dinner where he knocked over the glass and left, leaving Claire there in public, holding the embarrassment alone. The woman didn't make a shock face. Didn't go, wow. Just took notes and asked, "Do you want to stay married or do you want to keep being right?" Ethan stood still, and his throat went up and down as if he were going to swallow a stone. He answered low, "I want to go back to being someone reliable." The woman pointed to her own file and said, "Then start with the basics. Routine, treatment, responsibility." Ethan said he left there with scheduled times, clear guidelines, and a paper in his hand, folded in his pocket, as if it were a map. The same day, he went back home and didn't make a scene. Didn't kneel, didn't swear love. He waited for Claire to arrive, and when she entered, her brother wasn't with her this time, just her. Claire stopped at the door, observed his face, shoulders lower, the way of holding his hands. Ethan didn't run to hug. He stayed in place and spoke simply, "I went." Claire didn't answer immediately, just put her purse on the chair and stood in silence, like someone checking if the sentence has weight. Ethan then opened the proposal in the most direct way he could. "I'm not going to ask you for one more chance by screaming. I'm going to offer you a plan." He spoke of treatment, of monitoring, of stopping with the bar after the shift, of accepting the consequences at work, of sleeping in a separate room for a while if she wanted. Spoke of a cohabitation agreement, clear, with boundaries, without blackmail. Claire listened without softening, without a smile, without comfort. When he finished, she breathed short and asked a single question, looking firmly, "And when you slip up, what are you going to do?" Ethan didn't answer with a pretty promise. He answered with action, took the cell phone out of his pocket and put it on top of the table, screen facing her, showing the contacts and the times. "I will call. I will warn you. I will show up." The taxi was already arriving at his destination when Ethan finished telling me this part. The rain had diminished, and the city seemed sharper through the glass. I pulled over near a building in Queens, and he stayed a few seconds without opening the door, looking at his own hands as if remembering that they can also build, not just put out fire. Before getting out, he said a short sentence with his voice firmer than when he entered. I learned that heroism without a home becomes an excuse. He pulled his jacket, put it on his shoulder, and left. The door closed with a dry click, and that last suspension hung in the air. Claire's answer had been heard, but hadn't been told. The door had closed with that dry click, and I was already ready to turn the corner when I saw it. His cell phone had slipped out of his pocket and stayed there in the seam of the seat, vibrating softly like a scared heart. "Hey, you forgot it!" I shouted through the window. Ethan came running back, the fine rain wetting his face, and when he took the device back, the screen lit up alone with a newly arrived message. He stood there, on the sidewalk, reading. You couldn't see the whole text, but you could see the name, Claire. And you could see his face change, not with relief, not with victory, but with something heavier and more real, responsibility. He raised his eyes to me, nodded once, like someone thanking without words, and entered the building. I don't know if she said come back or move on, but I know that for the first time, he wasn't running away from the answer. That night taught me that there are people who save the whole world, and forget to save their own name in the family agenda. Ethan could be a hero in any fire, but he needed to lose the suitcase, the ring, and almost the daughter to understand that real courage is facing your own reflection without a uniform. The cell phone vibrated again when he had already gone inside, and I just thought, whatever she wrote, what matters now is if he will act, or just promise. If this story moved you, leave a comment with the word courage and share it with someone who needs to understand that being a hero out there doesn't justify being absent in here.